Well, good morning, everyone. And Carl, thank you for that very kind introduction. I feel bad that my speech isn't about nuclear energy now, although I think you gave a really good pitch about why we should be getting into that field too. You might want to talk with my Deputy Minister, Larry Comar, because I gather we also have some uranium potential in Alberta as well. So maybe there's more of that industry we can build out. But I am very pleased to be here and welcome the world back to Alberta for the Global Energy Show, because a lot has certainly changed since we met last year here in Calgary. And one thing is still true. We are here with so many of the skilled people who make Canada's energy industry a global leader. But a lot has changed, and those changes have reinforced one unmistakable lesson, that the world needs more abundant, affordable, and reliable energy. And providing that energy has been Alberta's mission for decades, and we're not about to stop now. That means producing more energy than ever before, more efficiently than ever before. And Alberta has the resources to do it. Our study earlier this year on Alberta's oil and gas reserves found 1.36 quadrillion cubic feet of oil and 1.8 trillion barrels of, 1.36 billion cubic feet of gas and 1.8 trillion barrels of oil. And at today's current technology, we can recover 130 trillion cubic feet of gas and 160 billion barrels of oil. And that will only improve. And Alberta's crude oil production has been trending upward to meet that demand. In April of 2025, Alberta's crude oil production was about 4.3 million barrels per day, up 2% from the same month last year. Every month this year, we have met or exceeded the previous record for production. The other good news is that we continue to expand the number of countries buying Alberta's oil and gas globally. The opening of the Trans Mountain expansion now brings a total of 890,000 barrels per day of crude from Alberta to British Columbia's Pacific coast. And with some enhancements, this volume will grow shortly to, we are told, about 1.2 million barrels per day by 2027. That lets us move more energy to key markets in Asia, particularly South Korea, Japan, and China. So anyone buying oil and gas from us can count on decades of reliable, responsibly produced supply. And now that energy is also a powerful antidote to much of the chaos and fear and uncertainty that is affecting so much of the world. And it comes with an added benefit, lower global emissions. By moving more natural gas, we can also help countries transition away from higher emitting fuels such as coal. A recent Fraser Institute study found that by doubling Canadian liquefied natural gas production and exporting the additional supply to Asia, we could reduce global emissions by up to 630 million tons annually. To put that into perspective, that's almost 90% of Canada's total greenhouse gas emissions each year. Plus, this country's first major gas terminal, LNG Canada, is on track to open very, very soon. I hear that there's a boat on the way. And that will bring the first liquefied natural gas to the world as soon as July. It has the capacity of 14 million tons per year when fully operational. And that is the equivalent to about 10% of Canada's total marketable natural gas production. So this sets the stage for Western Canada to provide energy security to the world. And all of that is encouraging, but it's not enough. We need significantly more infrastructure to make the most of Alberta's potential and to meet international demand. We believe that Alberta's energy can bring billions of people globally out of energy poverty. And all we need is more egress and the willingness of our federal government to support expanding pipelines with urgency. One ideal solution would be a new transportation and energy corridor northwest to the port of Prince Rupert in British Columbia. This is Canada's gateway to Asia. And it opens tremendous opportunities for exporting everything from fuel to food to critical minerals. Unlocking its full potential, of course, involves twinning rail lines, building inland ports and logistics hubs, expanding port infrastructure, and securing long-term labor stability. But the anchor tenant for this corridor must be a 42-inch pipeline moving 1 million incremental barrels of oil to those global markets. And we can't stop there. We need more bold nation-building projects and pipeline projects in particular to move our energy. We need projects that go north to Grays Bay, that go east to Churchill, and also potentially a modern version of Energy East. These routes address our nation's geopolitical priorities and Arctic security at a time when it is clear that Russia and China have eyes on our critical mineral wealth and as well these vital shipping lanes. These ideas are gaining traction. My Ontario counterpart, Premier Doug Ford, recently said that we need pipelines that go east, west, and north. And that is almost unheard of for an Ontario Premier to speak so boldly. But I think that Canadians now understand the risks that come with the dependence on just one customer. And there is a growing national consensus that Canada must build big to diversify the economy and secure our future. Recent polling from Nanos Research shows that more than half of Canadians support an east-west pipeline for oil and for natural gas. Nearly 9 in 10 Canadians view oil and gas as important to Canada's economy today. And of course, much of the opposition to developing the Canadian oil and gas industry comes from concerns over emissions. But in Alberta's case, those concerns are being addressed. Our producers have been making progress on the emissions challenge, and they've been doing it for decades. This province was the first in North America to introduce an industrial carbon price and emissions trading system all the way back in 2007. While our oil production has risen by 96% since 2012, which is an increase of about 1.6 million barrels per day, oil sands emissions continue to decline. In fact, Alberta had the greatest reduction in emissions of any Canadian province. We're also pioneering carbon capture, utilization, and storage at a commercial scale. We have invested almost $2 billion into this field to help it to mature. And our province is now home to 2 of the largest carbon capture, utilization, and storage projects on the continent. Since 2025, we have safely sequestered and stored more than 14 million tons of carbon dioxide and counting. Many commercial decarbonization projects have reached final investment decision, such as Dow with their net zero petrochemical project, Air Products, which is net zero hydrogen, and Shell with their hub. We also are going through approvals for Heidelberg for net zero cement and Strathcona Resources as well. To speed things up even more, we have launched the Alberta Carbon Capture Incentive Program. Over the next decade, it will provide $3 to $5 billion in funding to help industries add carbon capture to their operations. Our discussions to date with the federal government have included the need to complete the Pathways project with oil sands producers. In talking with this consortium, the project would see about 16 megatons of carbon dioxide taken out of the production stage annually and would ensure that Alberta's heavy oil would move on to a new pipeline in the port of Prince Rupert as a lower carbon barrel. It is this kind of win-win that we are looking for with our federal government to assist us in delivering for all Canadians. It is this kind of nation-building project that will deliver thousands of new jobs, billions in royalties and taxes that support our vital social fabric while delivering responsible and lower emissions to the world. And it is the construction of this vital infrastructure that we believe also must see Indigenous participation in the front end as the very first step in the process. Alberta's long history and experience with natural gas and our huge pipeline network has made us ideally suited also to mastering hydrogen, and we're well on our way to succeeding. Alberta is already Canada's largest hydrogen producer, and we can produce some of the lowest cost clean hydrogen in the world. So the pieces are in place for Alberta to become a major global supplier. We're building the right regulatory framework. We are creating partnerships and accelerating research and innovation. We opened our Clean Hydrogen Center of Excellence in 2022 with $50 million worth of funding. This funding has supported more than 60 projects with a total project value close to $250 billion, almost 5 times our initial investment. And our other innovation funding agency, Emission Reduction Alberta, has backed hydrogen projects worth a total of more than $2 billion. In March, we opened a hydrogen hub right here in Calgary, and also in March, the Edmonton Hydrogen Hub launched its next phase focused on long-term sustainability. We now have hydrogen hubs in both of our major cities, linking industry and researchers and innovators to share insights and breakthroughs. We're also looking at opportunities beyond our borders in countries like Japan and South Korea, which want to import millions of tons of hydrogen in the form of ammonia. And all of this is to say that Alberta refuses to stand still or slow down. So we recognize that global expectations around energy are shifting, even as demand for energy increases. And as we ramp up production, we're leading those expectations. We're setting the pace for everyone else to follow. There is no better example than the Indigenous participation that we already have in the energy sector. Indigenous peoples have been shut out of the energy economy for generations, and we are now putting them at the heart of it. 6 years ago, our government launched the Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation, which was the first organization of its kind in Canada. It now offers guarantees so that Indigenous communities can invest in major projects, especially in the resource sector. It started at $1 million, but we have since $1 billion, but we have since tripled their loan capacity so that they now have up to $3 billion in total lending potential. And so far, they have approved and underwritten almost $750 million in loan guarantees to 43 Indigenous communities. Ultimately, over the lifetime of those projects, we anticipate it will generate $1.2 billion worth of revenue directly for those communities. Indigenous people across the province are owners and workers and partners in energy projects. And this is a sign of the times, and I think a promise of the things to come. Obviously, Alberta benefits tremendously from developing its energy to the fullest, but the rewards aren't limited to our province or a handful of companies. Far from it. Everybody wins when Alberta realizes its full potential of its energy. Canadians get a massive boost in growth and prosperity and long-lasting revenues as well for governments at all levels. And Canada's reputation rises as the world puts trust in us. Well, everyone who buys Canadian energy gets two major benefits. One, of course, is safe and stable supplies. And the second is a drop in total global emissions as our energy replaces higher emitting sources. It's really hard to argue with this reasoning. And I've seen encouraging signs that the Prime Minister is open to this thinking. Now we need to turn these ideas and these opportunities into action. He recognizes that there are many major projects of national interest, and we need to move forward with them quickly by removing barriers that restrict private industry. I and, of course, the other premiers have been vocal that Western and Arctic resource corridors should be treated as nation-building projects. But we need to maintain the pressure to ensure policies are in place to support new infrastructure on a large scale, because we cannot build a pipeline to the West Coast if there is a tanker ban. And we cannot expand oil and gas production if we have an emissions cap. So I'm asking you to help us with the convincing. Make sure that the Government of Canada understands what's at stake here and what you want and what you need. Anything less than success means failing to act for Canada. It means failing to stand up for democracy and peaceful global development. And most importantly, it means a loss of economic prosperity that future Canadian youth and families cannot count on to enhance their standard of living locally and to eliminate energy poverty globally. And it means missing out on the chance to make a big dent in global emissions. None of that is acceptable. Problems need practical solutions, not more rhetoric. All the anti-development activism in the world won't accomplish a fraction of the good that Alberta's energy industry can do and already has done. That's the truth. And we should defend it together. Looking forward to the questions.
Premier, it's great to see you again.
Well, it's great to be here. I see I've got a couple of my colleagues here with me as well. My energy minister, Brian Jean, and I think I see, it's hard to miss him, he's 7 feet tall. Our Jobs Economy Minister, Joseph Scow, is here as well. So if I get in trouble with any of these questions, I might throw out a lifeline to get them to answer for me.
Well, it's great to have you and them here, as some of them were yesterday. I want to get right to it because I know your time's pressed. You talked in the last few sentences of your speech about the need to convince Ottawa of some of the things that have to happen. So how is that convincing going? Because you've got a relationship with Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, in the sense that you have been talking quite a bit. So how's it going on that?
I would say that he has a couple of problems he's facing, in that a lot of the people who imposed bad policies over the last 10 years are still in key positions in either his government or his caucus. So I recognize that he has a real challenge on climbing down on some of them. That being said, he also recognizes that it was one of the major policies he had to change within minutes of getting sworn in as prime minister was to get rid of the carbon tax because it was so unpopular and it was not achieving its goal. So I would say that he has demonstrated pragmatism on that. I think the world has changed dramatically since Donald Trump got elected in November. I think that's changed the national conversation. And I think he now has the ability to show leadership and be able to either substantially revise or completely eliminate some of those bad policies. I put a list of 9 of them together. We didn't see progress in this first session, but he only had a very short session. It's going to take a large amount of work to repeal them. So I'm going to give him some time to work with us to identify ways that we can address those. And I'm going to be optimistic, but I understand that the challenges are that he has a lot of people in his caucus who still believe that those policies are the right way to go.
What does time mean? You got to give him time.
I would say probably until the next legislative session, because I think they're going to be wrapped up in June. He's going to have a project list that he puts forward. And we have some important projects that we would like to see on that list. So I'll be able to see whether or not his commitment to building a new bitumen pipeline is real. We're working on getting a proponent and a route that we would be able to make that case to him. And then in the fall, when they return, that gives him enough time, I think, to address things like the rewrite of Bill C-69, ending the pet and tanker ban, ending the emissions cap. He has to make a decision on net zero vehicles because even Ford has now said there's just no demand for it. And the aggressive policies come into effect in January, which will impact our auto business in Ontario. So there's lots of things that he has to address, I think, immediately to show that there's a shift. But I think it will take another legislative session to be able to do some of that.
So for another 4 to 6 months, probably. Do you have to get everything on your list?
Well, there's no point in building a pipeline for bitumen to the northwest BC coast if you have a tanker ban. But no one's going to put oil in a pipeline if they can't export it. You cannot encourage producers to take the risk, and there's criminal penalties associated with all of the legislation the federal government has passed, to take the risk of not meeting aggressive emissions targets by 2030 or 2035, so you won't get an increase in production. It's absurd for us to be expanding and celebrating expansion of LNG to Asia for electricity use and then punishing it in our own province with the net zero power grid. So there's some things that are chaotic policy that don't make sense in this new environment that we are in. And so I would say that if I could go through each of them, I would say each of them is essential to demonstrate that we really are going to be that energy and economic superpower he says he wants Canada to be.
They're essential, so you've got to get all 9?
Well, we can go through each of them. I mean, net zero cars, I'll give it, I could, really. I mean,
yeah, I know you could.
but how can we, I mean, this greenwashing policy, how can I even, I'm exempted as provincial leader. But some of the things that I've said would be illegal for my companies to say under the existing law because it would be called greenwashing. How can you celebrate the things that we're doing to expand production and reduce emissions if it's illegal in Canada to be able to talk about them? So yes, there were 9 terrible policies. That's my short list, Peter. I have a much longer list of things that we need to fix. But I would say those are the essential ones.
In spite of that, you used the word encouraging as to where things stand. And yesterday we kept hearing from different people in the industry and in government that were cautiously optimistic. Ron Ambrose said yesterday, sitting on this platform, that if Carney delivers on the things we are cautiously optimistic about, then the whole issue of secession, separation, referendum would basically fade away. It would disappear. Would you agree with that?
She may be right. I mean, the last time a separatist was elected in Alberta was in 1982, right in the middle of the National Energy Program. And when they went to a general election, they ended up getting defeated. But a couple of years later, Brian Mulroney came in and he eliminated the National Energy Program. And we had a long period of time where we were focusing on the things that matter to Canada. And I think it faded into the background. It rose again towards the end of the Jean Chrétien era. But as soon as Stephen Harper came in, again, it went back to single-digit levels. And so I think a lot of it is related to how Ottawa treats us, particularly around energy, because it's not just about It's not ideological and it's not symbolic. It matters to people. When I look at what missed opportunity we had, if we had built Northern Gateway, if we had built Energy East, if we had built Keystone, Alberta would have 2.5 million more barrels per day of production. That is $55 billion per year of GDP, of which governments get about 40% of it. That's a massive amount of money to spend on schools and hospitals and roads and attracting people and being able to support them with social programs. We've got a lot of pressures in Alberta because people want to come here, they want to work. And so we need to be able to have government with the revenues to be able to keep up with that. And so that is what we have missed out on. And I sure don't want to see us miss out on that going forward into the future.
When you say she may be right, do you lean in that direction?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I've been doing everything to convince the people who are wanting to give up on Canada that we've got to give it one more shot, that we've got to try with this Prime Minister to get a new deal for Alberta, and that I will do my level best to try to get those things addressed. And so I think the Prime Minister understands that, takes it seriously, as do I. And so that's why we're going to begin to have a table where we can have these conversations and hopefully over the next 6 months be able to come to an agreement.
Let's talk about the pipeline issue for a moment, because you outlined, 3 different ones for sure, west, north, and kind of northeast to Churchill. I started in Churchill. I started my career in Churchill, so I have a bond with the Churchill story. But, this is kind of similar to that last question. Can you get all? Is it realistic to think of 3 different pipelines happening in the short term, or in terms of purchasing, accessing the funds needed to do pipelines, working out the agreements that are needed, both provincially and with Indigenous groups?
Well, I think so. I think it does, because it depends on your time frame. I think that's the recalibration that is happening, is that the former Prime Minister wanted to achieve a lot of targets by 2030 and 2035, which is impossible. I think the recalibration people are having is that whatever addition of new energy sources is going to take longer to do. I mean, even on nuclear, if we were to start the process to try to get a nuclear installation in Alberta, it would take a minimum of 10 years starting today. So we couldn't even have the first project built until 2035. So the idea that you could completely decarbonize your grid with that kind of technology is not going to happen in the next 10 years. You have to have a longer time frame. Same thing with bitumen as well. Bitumen is a very valuable product. You can make 6,000 different products out of a barrel of oil, including lubricants, petrochemicals, building materials, asphalt. And so increasingly we are looking at new ways of using that product. And so I'm very much of the view that we should not be talking about phasing out oil and gas production. We should be talking about phasing out emissions. That's the proper conversation to have. And that's why we talk about carbon capture, utilization, and storage, as well as adding in some of the new zero emissions type of electricity, as well as looking at direct air capture as that final mile. We've got a major center in the middle in central Alberta that is working on direct air capture technologies as well. So it's kind of an all of the above approach. And that's why I would say that maybe the first step is a couple of pipeline expansions with Trans Mountain, as well as to the U.S. I know that the U.S. is quite interested in having this conversation with us about how to increase the supply of our oil going south. But then we've also seen the premiers come together looking at a former Prince Rupert to Churchill energy corridor that would be in all of the above. Let's get transmission lines so that we can get hydroelectric power and nuclear going across the country. Let's get new roads. Let's twin the rail line. Let's get inland ports, and let's get oil and gas pipelines. And so, yeah, I think we could certainly do those two. Grays Bay, I think, is a great opportunity for critical minerals initially. And then if it makes sense for us to also build a pipeline up there as well. But I think the ones I feel the strongest about are some of the American options, Port of Prince Rupert and Churchill.
I'm glad to hear the Churchill. Whatever routes are chosen, if all or some, are going to cost a lot of money. Huge dollar numbers. And it's got to come from everywhere, right? Government, industry. Do you worry at all that this talk that we referred to earlier of secession, separation, is hurting you on that front in terms of the raising of the investment income that would be needed? And I ask you that because you hear it on the floor here, And you've heard it from some major players within the industry in Alberta.
Well, I guess it's compared to what? Compared to the $500 billion worth of investment that we lost because of terrible federal policy that scared away investment? Like, that's what I'm comparing it to, is that we could have had the 3 pipelines that I mentioned. We could have had Tech Frontier Mine. We could have had, I think there were 18 different LNG projects that were on the docket at one point. But the bad federal policy ended up creating a chill in the private sector. So the last man standing with the Trans Mountain Pipeline had to be built by the federal government because no one was willing to do it. So we cannot persist with the status quo. The status quo is what is killing investment. And what I'm saying is let's change the status quo. Let's fix those bad policies. Not only would it have the effect of dampening, I think, the autonomous sentiment that we're seeing among many Albertans, but it would also be good for the country. And it would also turn around the negative investment climate that we've earned a reputation for in the country.
You talked about the kind of things you've been hearing from some of your other partners within the Federation and how they're been in sync in many ways with what you were saying. Who's your best friend in the Federation?
We have such a great table at the Premier's table. Honestly, I have such admiration. It won't surprise you that my closest allies are those who share my political stripes. So it's Scott Bowe and Doug Ford and Tim Houston. But I have been so impressed with Bob Canoe. I mean, that is real leadership. He's an NDP premier who probably has the same pressures and tensions in his caucus as Mark Carney and David Eby do. But look what he's done. He approved the first gold mine in his province in 15 years. When he came in, a pipeline burst. He had to build an oil pipeline as one of his first acts as an NDP premier. And he has been very vocal in saying that he wants Churchill to be a major export hub, including oil and gas, and he's been unequivocal about that. He's also shown such incredible leadership in really pushing the federal government to meet its 2% NATO target. He was the one who insisted in our first meetings that we as premiers had to put that in our communique, and look what's happened. We've got Prime Minister Carney doing the same thing. So I would say, I could say nice things about every one of the premiers, but I would say that there really is, especially among the Western premiers, a real sense of mutual aid that is kicking in, and that we really want to, because I think we believe in Western Canada in particular, that we have so much ability with all the resources that we have. If we work together, everybody will benefit. Because Port of Prince Rupert, the reason I talk about that one is we're already exporting 30 million tons a year out of that port. And if CN can just get a twin line, now all of a sudden you can bring food, fiber, Dow Chemical, Petrochemical with their pelletized plastics. That's going to be going up to Port of Prince Rupert. Ammonia, we've already got propane going out, 50% of Japan's supply going out there. They just, in British Columbia, announced the PRGT line, which is going to terminate right there. So that's LNG, gets the bitumen going there. All of a sudden, this becomes a major route to do export of all of the products that we care about. And Asia is only 8 to 10 days away. So it's such an advantage. And so that's what we're trying to look at, is rather than just have a project that one province benefits from, let's figure out a way that we can all benefit from the major investment. And I think that might be the change that we've seen. And
when you say Western Canada, I assume you're including BC, even though there have been some differences between you and Premier Eby on the pipeline issue.
I'll convince David Eby.
I'll
convince him.
You can convince him.
I'll convince him. I'm sensitive to the issues that were raised before. I mean, the issues that were raised before were issues around emissions. So that's why I mentioned that we think that having the bitumen pipeline built in conjunction with Pathways, so it's a decarbonized product, so that it's actually lower emissions, we think that that's an advantage. We have established AIOC that didn't exist when Northern Gateway was first being considered. And so that allows for us at the outset to be talking about a meaningful ownership stake and a weight into it. We've had some success in that with a number of different pipeline projects that we backed up. So I think that addresses issue number 2. Issue number 3 is I know that there were concerns about Kitimat being the port because of the Douglas Channel, that some of the issue of trying to navigate around sandbars and some of the islands there. Well, then let's go to Port of Prince Rupert. It's a little, 200 kilometers longer, but it's a clearer run to be able to get to the open sea. So we're doing what we can to address the legitimate concerns that we've heard. I think what I've heard Premier Eby say recently is there's no project and no proponent. Well, that's my job. There will be soon. We're working very hard on being able to get industry players, private sector players, to realize this time might be different, and to be able to come forward and put that forward. And so if I'm successful in doing that, then we'll get it on the project list, and we'll work through the 2-year approval process, and we'll see if we can get somewhere.
And I push you for 2 extra minutes. We're already kind of over the time, and I know you've got other things waiting.
It's just the media.
That's right. That's what they used to say about you, right?
And you.
Somebody said to me yesterday, there are days right now in this period of cautious optimism where sometimes I wake up and I think, they actually elected a conservative prime minister. When you think of some of the things that he's done, cut taxes, he's probably going to have to cut spending to do all the new spending he's talking about, like defense department, etc. He's pushed back on some of his own environmental positions of the past. Is he a conservative?
If you look at Warren Kinsella's column, he said that he's just blatantly stolen the conservative platform. And I think that he has 5 examples of how he's done that. And I think it happens to be true. What I would say about the Liberals is that they have had periods in their history where they have been very conservative. If you look at the most conservative duo of Prime Minister and Finance Minister we've had in this country in modern times, it was Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin. We haven't had that successive run of surpluses since. They had to massively cut the spending because we were about to hit a debt wall. And so, and there were a number of names from that time, like John Manley and Anne McClellan. There were a number of names that were seen to be more blue Liberals, I think was the term. But I think the blue Liberals, I don't know where they went over the last 10 years, but they sure weren't in the caucus and cabinet of Justin Trudeau. So is it the case that Mark Carney is more of that former type of Liberal persuasion? Maybe. He was a banker to a conservative government under Harper, a banker to a conservative government when he went to the UK. Clearly, that demonstrates more of a pragmatism. However, when he left, he formed the Glasgow Net Zero Alliance, and then attempted to line up pension funds and banks to defund our oil and gas sector. So you can see my skepticism. And I've seen that he has 2 different career paths that he's been on. And I'm wondering which is going to emerge. Is it the pragmatic banker, or is it the net zero alliance booster? And so I think we're seeing some encouraging signs. I think he can demonstrate pragmatism, and I'm hoping that he realizes that this is just good for the country, because he can't achieve the goals that he wants. This is what I always tell my liberal and socialist friends: is until you generate wealth, you cannot spend it. You can have all these wonderful aspirations about the social programs you want to expand and what you want government to do, but you need private industry to create the wealth so you can tax it, so you can have the revenue to do that. And the model that we've been going on, suppressing wealth creation and suppressing the economy and racking up massive amount of debt, is just not working for us. It's driving our living standards lower, it's driving our economic growth lower, it's driving our wage growth lower. So let's try something different. Let's see if we can work together to unleash all of the power that we have in the private sector, and then be able to benefit mutually from that. That's my pitch, though. We'll see if it works.
Well, we'll be watching you over the next 4 to 6 months to see what happens and what they deliver and what that relationship works out. But just one last point on a personal note from me. My granddaughter graduated chemical engineering, University of Ottawa, just a couple of months ago. This week, she got her first job with carbon engineering here in Calgary.
Ooh, that's fantastic.
So she's very excited.
That is so
it's
great.
part of that, rapidly growing field that you talked about in your speech.
Well, let me then just on that, because I think it's important, because we lost carbon engineering. Carbon engineering went to the United States because of, under Joe Biden, there were a whole pile of green credits that they qualified for. And I just saw one of the reps from the company recently, and they said they were moving back here. And that, to me, is the real opportunity for Canada, is that if we can maintain a pricing structure on our industrial pricing that is reasonable and does not interfere with growth, knowing that our largest competitor and trading partner, the United States, is trying to get those same investments, but also knowing that our customers in Europe and Asia want to have a decarbonized product, then we can grow both industries at the same time. That's why I think that Canada is uniquely positioned to really benefit from having that dual focus, that Americans are clearly going in a 180-degree direction from they were 6 months ago. We can, I think, moderate the direction that we were going and still be able to benefit from the foot we have in both worlds. And I think that's our real opportunity.